The city glowed with life as the evening rush painted the streets with noise and color. But inside a towering glass apartment overlooking the skyline, silence ruled. Arman sat at the head of a long dining table. The meal was lavish: roasted meat, steaming vegetables, fine wine. Yet across the polished wood, the other chairs were empty. He picked at his food absent-mindedly, scrolling through messages on his phone. Congratulations from colleagues, invitations to business galas, updates on hospital profits. Not one message asked how he was, not one voice called him just to talk. He leaned back in his chair, gazing at the massive chandelier above him. It sparkled, but only reminded him of how hollow his evenings had become. Outside, the world saw him as a man who had it all. The city's most successful surgeon, owner of luxury cars, a mansion that most people only dreamed of. But inside, Arman lived with a silence that no wealth could fill. Every night was the same: work, dinner, sleep. A cycle of achievements without meaning. A cycle of victories without joy. And though he never admitted it aloud, deep down he knew. He was one of the loneliest men alive. Morning came with the same routine. Arman dressed in his tailored suit, adjusted his tie in the mirror, and left his silent apartment. His chauffeur opened the car door, and within minutes, the black luxury sedan merged into the city's traffic. At the hospital, Arman was greeted with respect everywhere he went. Nurses lowered their voices as he passed. Patients spoke his name with admiration, sometimes even awe. "That's Dr. Arman," they whispered, "the man who saved hundreds of lives." In meetings, his colleagues praised his brilliance. He was decisive, efficient, and always in control. Yet, behind the polished smile, there was no warmth. Conversations ended with business, never laughter. When the meeting room emptied, Arman was always the one left standing by himself. Later that afternoon, after another flawless surgery, his team clapped politely. Arman nodded, thanked them, and returned to his office. The walls were lined with certificates, awards, and photographs of him shaking hands with powerful people. But there was not a single personal picture, no family portraits, no childhood memories, no sign of a life outside of success. From the outside, it looked like victory. But inside, Arman felt like a man trapped in a glass case, admired by the world, but untouched by love. That evening he left work and asked his driver to stop at a nearby café. He didn't want to go home just yet. Home meant silence, and silence had become unbearable. The café was warm and lively, filled with the hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh bread. Arman chose a corner table away from the noise and ordered his usual meal: grilled chicken, soup, and coffee. He ate mechanically, his eyes fixed on the window, watching the traffic lights blink red and green. But then, he felt something, a gaze. Slowly, he turned his head. Near the glass door, two children sat huddled together. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, with messy hair and a pale face. Beside him, a younger girl, no older than 7, clutching his arm as though it was her only shield in the world. Their clothes were torn, their shoes worn thin. They didn't speak, but their eyes followed every bite of food on Arman's plate. The boy's lips trembled as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. The girl simply leaned against him, too weak to hide her hunger. Arman looked away quickly, uncomfortable. He focused on his meal, sipping his coffee, but he could still feel their eyes on him. Every time he lifted his fork, he sensed their silent hope. Every time he set it down, he felt their disappointment. Minutes passed. The children didn't move. They just watched, quietly, patiently, as though waiting for something they dared not ask for. Arman's heart began to pound. He had faced life-and-death situations in operating rooms, but this simple gaze shook him more than he cared to admit. He tried to distract himself by checking his phone, but even then, his eyes drifted back to the door. The boy's small hands were wrapped tightly around his sister's, and in that grip was a silent promise. He would protect her, no matter how hungry they were. The cafe around him grew louder with laughter, the clinking of cups, the chatter of families sharing meals. Yet for Arman, the only sound that mattered was the growl of hunger he imagined in those children's stomachs. Arman finished half his meal and pushed the plate aside. His appetite was gone, though he could not explain why. He reached for his coffee, but his hand stopped midway. The boy was standing there, just a few feet away, his little sister still seated near the door. The boy's hands were shaking, his voice soft but steady. "Sir," he began, eyes fixed on the half-eaten plate. Could we have what you won't finish?" The words were so simple, yet they cut through the air like a blade. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The cafe noise faded. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of plates, none of it reached Arman's ears anymore. All he could hear was that trembling request. He stared at the boy, unable to respond. His chest tightened, as though someone had pressed a heavy weight against it. In his entire life of achievements and victories, nobody had ever spoken to him with such raw honesty, such desperation. The boy lowered his head quickly, as though ashamed of even asking. His small hands twisted together nervously, while his sister peeked from behind him, her eyes wide, her lips dry. Arman opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Memories flashed before his eyes. His childhood in a modest home, the nights when his father worked 2 jobs just to bring bread to the table. He remembered the shame of wearing old clothes to school, the hunger he once tried to hide. He had buried those memories deep beneath layers of success. But in this moment, they came rushing back like a flood, breaking the walls he had built around his heart. Slowly, he pushed the plate toward the boy. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Take it." The boy looked up, stunned. Then he carefully lifted the plate and carried it to his sister. She smiled faintly as he set the food before her. Together they ate, not greedily but gratefully, as though each bite was a treasure. Arman watched in silence. He had dined in the world's finest restaurants, but never had he seen anyone eat with such pure gratitude. And in their small, fragile smiles, he saw something he had lost long ago, the simple joy of sharing a meal with someone you love. For the first time in years, Arman felt tears burning in his eyes. He quickly looked away, but he knew the truth. This single moment had changed something inside him forever. As the children ate, Arman leaned back in his chair, but his mind was no longer in the cafe. The boy's trembling voice had unlocked a door inside him that he thought was sealed forever. Behind that door lay the years he had tried to forget. He saw himself as a boy of 10, sitting at a wooden table in a dimly lit kitchen. His mother placed a small plate in front of him, bread and lentils, barely enough for one. Yet she smiled and said, "Eat, Arman. You need your strength for school." He remembered hesitating, noticing that her own plate was empty. "What about you, Mama?" he had asked. She brushed his hair back and whispered, "I'll eat later." But she never did. She always went hungry so her children could eat. Another memory surfaced, a cold winter evening. His father came home late, hands rough from labor. He set a single bag of rice on the table. Arman and his siblings cheered as if it were a feast. His father smiled, but behind that smile was exhaustion, sacrifice, and silent tears he never let them see. The images struck Arman harder than any memory had in years. He realized he had climbed so high in life that he had forgotten the ground he once stood on. The hunger in those children's eyes mirrored the hunger he once carried, the hunger that had driven him to become the man he was today. Arman closed his eyes. He remembered walking to school with shoes so worn that the cold bit through the soles. He remembered pretending he wasn't hungry when his classmates opened their lunchboxes, ashamed to admit he had nothing inside his own. He remembered promising himself, "One day, I'll be rich. One day I'll never go hungry again." And he had kept that promise, but in the process, he had built walls so high that he forgot the people on the other side, people still living the life he once knew. Arman opened his eyes again and saw the boy breaking a piece of bread in half, giving the larger share to his sister. The girl giggled softly, grateful, her cheeks finally showing a hint of color as she chewed. That simple act of love, the boy feeding his sister before himself, cut through Arman's heart. He thought of his younger brother, the one he used to protect the same way, back when they were children. Where had that boy gone? Where had he gone? Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the table. A message flashed. "Dinner tonight at the Ambassadors Club. Important investors attending. Don't be late." Arman stared at the message, then at the children. For years, he had rushed to dinners like that, surrounded by wealth and power, yet always alone. Tonight, he realized, the most important dinner he could attend was happening right here, not in an exclusive hall, but at a simple cafe table shared with two hungry children. For the first time in years, Arman felt something stir inside his chest. Not pride, not ambition, something else, something he had buried too deep. Compassion. The children finished the last crumbs on the plate, their faces glowing with the quiet relief of a hunger finally eased. They whispered a soft, "Thank you," almost too shy to meet Arman's eyes. The boy tried to slide the empty plate back to the table, but his hands lingered on it as though reluctant to let go of the meal that had meant so much. Arman studied them in silence. His heart ached, not only because they had been hungry, but because he knew this plate of food was just one night's answer to a much larger struggle. What about tomorrow? What about next week? Would they sit at this cafe again, waiting, hoping, begging? The thought was unbearable. He motioned to the waiter. "Bring 2 more meals, and a dessert, something warm." The waiter raised an eyebrow in surprise but nodded quickly. Within minutes, steaming plates arrived. Rice, soup, fresh bread, and a small chocolate cake. The children's eyes widened as though they had never seen such abundance before. "Eat," Arman said gently. His voice, usually cold and commanding, now carried warmth. "Eat until you are full." The boy hesitated, glancing at his sister, then at Arman. "Are you sure, sir?" he asked softly. "I'm sure," Arman replied. "Tonight you're my guests." The girl giggled, a sound so light, so pure, it melted the last of the ice around Arman's heart. The children began eating again, slower this time, savoring every bite. The boy carefully cut the cake into 2 equal pieces, giving his sister the first slice. She laughed again, her cheeks finally glowing with joy. Arman sat back and watched. A strange peace settled over him, a peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about deadlines, meetings, or the endless chase of success. For the first time, he wasn't dining alone. He cleared his throat softly. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The boy's face darkened. He lowered his eyes, pushing food around the plate. "Our mother is sick, very sick. She can't work. Our father, he left a long time ago." His voice cracked. "We try to take care of her, but it's hard." Arman felt a sting in his chest. He had saved countless lives in the operating room, yet here were 2 children suffering outside the hospital walls, invisible to the world. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He slid a few bills across the table. "Take this," he said. "Buy what you need. Medicine for your mother, food for yourselves." The boy's eyes widened. He shook his head firmly, pushing the money back. "No, sir. You already gave us food. That is enough. Mama says we should never take more than we need. Arman froze. The words echoed inside him like a bell. Never take more than we need. In that moment, he realized these children, despite their poverty, had more dignity and integrity than many of the wealthy men he dined with at luxury banquets. They were rich, not in money but in values. He swallowed hard and said quietly, "Then let me help in another way. Will you take me to meet your mother?" The boy looked at his sister, uncertain. Then after a long pause, he nodded. The night air was cold as Arman followed the children through narrow streets he had never walked before. His polished shoes clicked against broken pavements, his expensive coat brushing against walls painted with years of neglect. The city he thought he knew suddenly revealed a face he had never seen, a hidden world of poverty and struggle, just a few miles away from his luxury apartment. The boy walked confidently despite his small frame, holding his sister's hand. Arman noticed how he always kept her close, guiding her carefully around potholes, making sure she never stumbled. The protective strength in such a young child touched Arman deeply. Finally, they stopped before a crumbling building. Its windows were cracked, the walls stained with dampness. The boy pushed open a wooden door that groaned under its weight. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of illness and damp cloth. In a corner lay a woman on a thin mattress. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. Yet when she saw her children enter, a weak smile curved on her lips. "You're back," she whispered, her voice fragile. The children ran to her side. The girl placed the leftover bread beside her. "Mama, we ate today," she said proudly. "A kind man shared his food with us." The woman's eyes lifted slowly toward Arman. For a moment, embarrassment flickered across her face. She struggled to sit up, pulling the blanket closer as if ashamed of her condition. "Sir, forgive me," she murmured. "They shouldn't have troubled you." Arman stepped forward gently. "They didn't trouble me," he said softly. "They reminded me of something I had forgotten. Kindness." The woman's eyes glistened. She tried to thank him, but a fit of coughing shook her body. The boy quickly fetched a glass of water, his small hands trembling as he held it to her lips. Arman's chest tightened at the sight. This wasn't just poverty, it was survival. He crouched beside her, his voice steady. "I'm a doctor. Let me help." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "A doctor?" she whispered. Arman gently checked her pulse, her breathing, and realized she needed proper treatment, something far beyond what this broken room could offer. "She needs a hospital," Arman said firmly, looking at the children. "Will you trust me to take her there?" The boy hesitated, torn between fear and hope. Then he nodded slowly. That night, Arman arranged for her to be admitted to his own hospital. He stayed by her side, instructing nurses, ensuring she received the best care. The children clung to each other in the waiting room, their wide eyes filled with both worry and wonder. Hours later, when the doctor on duty assured Arman that she was stable, he finally exhaled in relief. The boy and girl hugged him tightly, their small arms wrapping around his waist. "Thank you, sir," the boy whispered. "You saved our mother." Arman's throat tightened. He had saved countless lives before, but this one felt different. For the first time, he wasn't just a doctor, he was a protector, a giver, a human being whose wealth was measured not in money, but in compassion. In the days that followed, Arman visited them often. He brought books for the boy, toys for the girl, and healthy meals for their mother. But more than that, he brought presence, sitting with them, listening to their stories, sharing laughter. Slowly, the children stopped calling him Sir and began calling him Uncle Arman. With every visit, the walls of loneliness around his heart began to crumble. For years he had dined alone, lived alone, succeeded alone. But here, in the warmth of this fragile little family, he finally found something greater than success: belonging. Weeks passed, and the cold of winter slowly gave way to the gentle warmth of spring. The children's mother grew stronger under proper care, her face no longer pale, but filled with life again. Each time Arman visited, she greeted him with gratitude that words could never capture. The boy, once cautious and shy, now spoke freely, sharing his dreams of becoming a teacher. The little girl often climbed onto Arman's lap, giggling as she showed him the drawings she made with the crayons he had brought. Their laughter filled the air, laughter that Arman hadn't heard in his own home for years. One evening, Arman sat with them on the small balcony of their modest apartment. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The boy offered him a piece of bread, torn carefully in half. "Uncle Arman," he said, "you've given us so much. Please take this. Mama says real family always shares." Arman stared at the piece of bread in the boy's hand. His eyes burned, and for the first time, he didn't fight the tears. He accepted it, holding it gently, as though it was more precious than any fine meal he had ever eaten. Because in truth, it was. That night, as he drove back to his apartment, the city lights no longer seemed cold or distant. They shimmered with meaning. He passed by luxury hotels, exclusive clubs, the places that once defined his success. But he felt no desire to be inside them. His heart was already full in a way money had never achieved. Sitting in his grand dining room later, Arman didn't feel the weight of loneliness anymore. He no longer saw empty chairs. He saw the faces of two children who had unknowingly saved him from a life of emptiness. He realized that wealth was not measured in possessions, but in people, not in what we keep, but in what we give. And as he placed the small piece of bread the boy had given him on a silver plate, he whispered to himself, This is the richest meal I've ever had." For the first time in his life, Arman smiled. Not the polite smile of a successful man, but the genuine smile of a man who had finally discovered the true meaning of wealth.